And so I dedicate this to my mother, Pauline Blundred. And I'm asking all of us right now to do something real simple. Everybody smile. Just smile. Breathe in a big old smile that filters into our body. And it's amazing when we start a day with a little bit of silence and a little bit of smile. Just remember SS every day. A little bit of silence and a little bit of smile, how that can change our perspective and our outlook, not just for that day, but maybe for that week and for that month. So it's good to see you guys. You're doing an amazing work. It's phenomenal. And as I reflect on a couple things today, the first is this is my first event without my wife at. She died last August. 3 bouts of brain cancer. So this is the first time we're not together. I had a book signing last week at a coffee shop in Harrison. That felt weird because 2 years ago we were there as well to introduce the Rise Above book. But she wasn't there with me this time. And when we would be speaking to Queen City Hospice or Tri-Health nursing team, we've had so many opportunities to speak to small groups, large groups. I had the easiest job in the world. I'd introduce her for 5 minutes and then she would just do her thing and share her heart. And she'd always do one thing that very few people in the room could do at that time. She'd do 50 squats. And she would do 50 more. And then she'd ask the guys, the folks, to say, okay, you stand up, see if you can do 50 of these. And I rarely saw anybody that could do that. And this is a woman who had brain surgery twice, was given 6 months to live after the initial diagnosis. And so what I talk about today with the hallmarks of a thriver that is in the second book we wrote called Rise Above, those hallmarks bleed Donna. Every one of them I picked, I reflected on her. And so I want to talk about those today. But I first want to just share, you know, as I look at you all, you're all seasoned citizens. Notice the word seasoned. It means you've lived life. You've been beaten down. You've gotten yourself back up. And as Dave was sharing, we all have something going on in our lives right now that's causing us pain. But without pain, are we ever taught anything? Do we really ever take away lessons of life? If it's all going well, if everything is going our way, we might feel joyful and happy at that time, but have we learned anything? So it's interesting how God decides to want to develop our character, isn't it? He introduces, I'm going to call it for purposes of today, the big A. The big A is the big adversity word. And that can mean suffering. It can mean pain. It can mean loss. It can mean a challenge. I think of a father and a son. Father had a big challenge with his son. He was great at math and science, but he was really bad with words and spelling. He just couldn't get it. You know, he'd come up to his son and he'd say, spell Ohio, just to try to get him more into words. So his son came back and said, O-Y-O. And his dad said, that's not how you spell Ohio. I said, well, my teacher said the Indian word for Ohio is O-Y-O. And guess what it is? My son used to work with a brewery called Middle West Spirits, and their brand was O-Y-O. If you've had any of their vodka or gin somewhere, you may know that name. Pretty good stuff, by the way. I wouldn't know. But, so I said, okay, Indiana. Spell Indiana. The son thinks, I-N-D-I-N-E-R. I said, that's not how you spell Indiana. I said, well, we got a new kid in our class. He says, I'm from Indiana. I said, okay, I'm going to give you one more chance here where I know there won't be some weird concoction way you can handle this. Spell Mississippi. And the son goes, the state or the river. You get it? Okay, I know you haven't had all your coffee yet. So, that's a lighthearted challenge. But there's a lot more serious challenges in our life, and we're going to learn from those. But we do have a lot in common. We really do. You guys are probably at or near retirement, correct? Most of you? I see a little bit of gray hair, not much, just a teeny bit. In your case, you're blessed only down here. So, there's this guy that retires. It's his first week after full retirement. He's so happy and relaxed. He comes down for breakfast. His wife says, "What are you going to do today?" He says, "Nothing." His wife said, "Well, you did that yesterday." And his reply, "Well, I'm not finished yet." So we have a lot more in common, but as I reflect on how God works to put people in our lives and the way He orchestrates events is remarkable. I'm glad we don't see it at the time. We didn't see it 4 years ago at NOLA. We didn't see it when I met you down at Sawyer Point. And by the way, talk about a visionary. Do you know Gary? You know pickleball in Cincinnati at Sawyer Point? That's him. And it makes a huge, you touched me. Gary Lee says, by being here, because we're working together on projects, and he's trying to renovate that. That's a different story. But I wouldn't be here today, and maybe you wouldn't have something going on positive in your life if it weren't for something bad. I wouldn't be here if my wife were still just healthy and doing well, because I wouldn't have written a book, 2 books, and I wouldn't have written the 3rd book to dedicate to her. I wouldn't be here in this fashion had we not met at Sawyer Point playing pickleball. That connection would not have, but God orchestrated it. Isn't that just amazing how we see how God works in little ways that I'm glad we don't see at the time? Because then we can step back and just go, wow, you still care. You still want to use me. You still have put me in a place of service and of opportunity. My wife, I'm sorry. Oh, appreciate that. Thank you. My wife, I can never eliminate a time like this when I don't think of her. And the impact not only she had on my life, but on others. She exhibited strength when, candidly, and it's the first chapter of my first book, Staying Resilient When Life Throws You More Than a Curveball. I say, in that chapter, okay, I'm angry. I'm angry. She was the healthy one. And God dealt her a blow that I thought was not deserving. And I thought I was a real solid Christian with a good foundation and would handle this just fine. Well, guess what? She did and I didn't. I went to low places. I mimicked that song. I got friends in low places. And that one low place was Champion's Bar, where I'd stop on the way home from work and just drink. And leave Champion's Bar with 2 routines. I'd go to the bathroom there, brush my teeth, and put in some breath mints. So I got to the house when she was there, and she wouldn't know I'd been drinking. And the other thing was, I fell back to something that grabbed me in high school and college, and that was porn. It was a default. It was a hiding place. It was something that I was miserable with. I can proudly say, happily say, it's in my rearview mirror. But Satan, and if you haven't read this book lately, I'm reading again with a friend. We're going over it together. Wild at Heart by John Eldredge. He talks about how Satan works, uniquely tailor-made to our situations in our lives. He knows, as he describes in this book, he lurks in the perimeter of our lives and seeks ways to stick pins in the areas of our weakness and our vulnerability. He knew mine. I'm not blaming anybody but me, because I put myself in a position where it affected me, it affected our marriage with the choices I made. But thank God, the three things in particular that turned that around. First was Kathy Beecham. You know that name if you're at Crossroads Oakley. Did you know Kathy lost her husband to glioblastoma? Same cancer that my wife had. Do you know she wrote a book about that journey with her husband dying? So with a unique set of circumstances, I was introduced to her. Maybe somebody knew my story, and I remember somebody saying, set up an appointment with Kathy Beecham. So I emailed her, told her a little bit about me, and I met with her. And I met with her many, many times. She was such an amazing woman. She would sit with me, listen to me, talk to me. We talk about each of our stories. And the very final meeting we had, she looked at me and said, write a book. And of course, I didn't say, yeah, I've been thinking about that a long time. I'm just finally, thanks for giving me the affirmation. It was like, what? No, write a book. Seek God to give you insight and advice and consultation on what that topic should be. So I almost joined that group of people. If the New York Times reported that 60% of people are in the process of thinking about or attempting to write a book. 60%. Guess what percent of the people that actually finish and write a book? 1%. I was wanting to be in that 60%, because this is just too challenging. You know, this is not something that I've ever wanted to do, thought about doing. But thanks to her, she kept bugging me. She kept giving me guidance on it. And I did. And I didn't do it for the purpose of selling out books. Had no intention of that. I got a good publisher, got a good designer, got a good editor, so I did all the right things. And I started Thriver Ministries, so that the proceeds from my book sales, net proceeds, could go into an LLC named after my wife, the Thriver, Donna the Thriver, so I could help organizations such as you, which is what I did today when I handed a check to Dave, because you are doing thriving work, and that's who I want to support. I don't care if I make a nickel on Thriver Ministries, but if I can help others thrive, then I'm happy. The second is Rick Isles. Rick Isles has been a friend for years and years and years. We have become very close in the past 12 to 14 years when Parkinson's hit him and my wife got hit by cancer. He held me accountable. He encouraged me. He still does. And I encourage him. He wrote a book because I kept bugging him. And now he's writing a second book because I continue to bug him, because he has a story. And I encourage you to meet Rick. And very soon, I don't know what that soon means, but he's kind of hobbled up. He's had back surgery. So he's got plenty of time, and he sent me the introduction in the first chapter, and I said, man, you are on target. Keep plugging. And when he comes out with that second book, it's going to be big, because it's an amazing story of a man who has a heart for God to bless others through his own adversity. The third are the men at Crossroads. People like Tony Bratz, who leads a group, perhaps smaller in scale, but it's called Iron Sharpens Iron. They do similar things to you. We're younger at Crossroads Westside than you at Oakley, so you got a big head start on us. But Tony also leads a group with men centered on God's Word. Dig deep into God's Word. The book of Romans, that study we had and subsequent studies. If you really want to learn a little more about just digging deep into the body, connect with Tony as you leave. So the men's group and the the current men's group that I'm in, fittingly called for the West Side. Beer, barbecue, brothers, and the Bible. And believe it or not, it is that in that order. If you know the West Side, you'll understand, okay? It's always beer. We do throw in the Bible. But these guys, I was able to open up to, and I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel like I was the only miserable mess in the room. And they encouraged me, they blessed me, they've come alongside me, and they too have held me accountable. So who are these weirdos that are resilient? Who are these weirdos that thrive no matter what? Why do they thrive? Why are they resilient? This is not about me getting it, okay? And saying to you today, I'm there. I know I'm there. I can't go any further higher because I can go lower. When my mom died, I thought, okay, she had 94 years of life, almost 95. She's finally in heaven, which I know she is. She was an incredible influence in my life with the Lord. She was my go-to person. She encouraged me when I made decisions in life. Look, forget what your dad just said. He doesn't really mean it. You go for it. She was always in my corner. So I thought, I'm going to handle this. But guess what? I didn't. I went back, not to booze or porn, but I went into grief and depression again. I could feel it. My stomach got knots. Last Sunday, I drove to our family farm in Illinois and spread her ashes in the same tree where my dad, I spread his ashes and buried her urn right next to my dad's. And I cried all the way there and I cried all the way back. And that was not closure. I don't know if you ever have total closure when someone so close to you dies. You may let things drift a little and it doesn't hit quite as hard, but I don't think you ever have total 100% closure or the ability to say, that doesn't bug me anymore. And that's okay. Because why? We learn from that. We all have a story. You have a story. Every one of you, if you don't have that kind of story, you may someday. And you can't prepare for it. You can't just say, well, gee, if this happens to my wife, or my kid commits suicide, or my brother dies in a car wreck, if I just do these things now in preparation, I'll handle that. Let me ask you a few questions here from the book, the second book, Rise Above. And I think the thing that really honored me the most in this book were two things. Number one, that Donna and I wrote it together. I did the first one because she was recovering from that brain tumor. But we literally wrote it together. She edited it. She had a chapter in here. She inspired it. And I sent it to Chuck Mingo. And he said, Larry, I really like your book. And he wrote the foreword, which was, overwhelming to me that he would do that. He mentored me. He prayed for Donna. And he's an amazing man. I'm sure you know Chuck. The second is Mark Hall from Casting Crowns, which is a very high-level Christian contemporary singing group. They wrote the song Thrive, which was our theme song. I sent a copy of the book and a little letter requesting a review, and he wrote a testimonial to the book. Thank you, Larry and Donna, for reminding us in Rise Above of this truth and challenging us not only to survive in the hard times, but to trust God and to make us thrive. When I got these reviews and forward, I literally cried. And here's the deal, guys. Men don't like to cry. We're told not to when we're hit. That's for the ladies, right? How often do you see men cry? When's the last time you saw a man just pour open his heart and his eyes and weep? When's the last time? It's probably been a while, right? Because we're not supposed to. But I don't know if you heard a new song that just came out by Ryan Stevenson. It's relatively new. It's on K-Love and on, XM. His mother died of cancer at age 43, and she was with him. He was with her the last part of her life, just like I was with Donna the last 2 weeks when she was in a hospital bed. And his mother said, the last thing she said to him was, "It's okay to cry." And so he wrote a song that's called "It's Okay to Be Broken." And in that song, over and over again, he said, "It's okay to cry." And I think crying and smiling, and the reverse of that is crying, are some of the healthiest things we can do. They're simple, but they're the healthiest things we can do in times like this. And the fourth is the sport of pickleball. I'm a believer in this sport, not just from the physical activity, but the community that surrounds it. That is why in the book that's back there, the new children's book, it is called How Pickleball Saved Ollie Otter. Now, who's Ollie? My first grandchild. There's 4 critters: Ollie Otter, Wally the Wallaby, Robbie the Raccoon, and did I say Wally the Wallaby? Robbie the Raccoon, Ollie the Otter. Help me, Josiah. Who's the 4th one? It's in the book. Isn't it funny how you write a book and you can't even remember it all? But pickleball came into my life a little about 2 years ago when I was in St. Louis walking with a buddy who, interestingly, and sadly, healthy. He now has seizures and he has Parkinson's disease. Rick has talked to him to encourage him. And so we're in this park and I hear this dink-donk noise. I thought there was an alien invasion of the tennis court. But it was pickleball. And I came back home. Long story short, in the west side of town, maybe we're better than the east side in terms of that. I don't know. But these people embraced me. They knew what was going on. Donna would walk when I'd play pickleball. Met Gary down there. And to give you a long story short of how these people are, when Donna died, they wrote me a big card. And they put $400 in there that they had collected to go to Block Ministries Redeemed Hubs for women coming out of drug addiction and prostitution, because that is what mattered to Donna. I didn't want flowers. I knew she wouldn't want flowers. And then they called me and said, "Can you assemble a bunch of Donna's scarves and blouses and clothes and give it to us?" And I thought, I don't even want to understand why, but here, fine. I knew they were going to do something with it, but men don't understand that kind of stuff. My daughter-in-law said, "Well, here's what they're going to do," and that's exactly what they did. They came back with 4 pillows, one for each of my kids and one for me, with Donna's clothes. That's the pickleball community that I know. So Donna was able to see the writing of this children's book and look at the illustrations, but she passed before it got published. And so I dedicated it to her. And I dedicate it to the people who helped me get by. It's an amazing thing when you're around people that love the Lord and love each other. So I'm going to touch on very quickly 3 of the 5 hallmarks of a thriver. The first is a thriver listens with empathy or compassion. Listens with empathy or compassion. They're different, aren't they? We can have compassion on each other, but I don't have empathy if I don't understand Gary's situation, if I haven't lived it and breathed it. And the key word, I think, is how we listen. There's a Chinese proverb that talks about that. It's in the book. The Chinese character for the word listen has 3 components. You listen with your eyes, you see the person. You listen with your ears, you hear the person. And you listen with your heart at the same time. That's true listening. Not just hearing Because sometimes we're so engaged in trying to listen, we're thinking of what the answer should be before we really listen to the person. And sometimes the best thing we can do, hey buddy, the best thing we can do is say nothing. Just be available. Just listen. The second component of a thriver, there's 6 in the book, so I've just highlighted 3 here, is that a thriver engages, encourages, and invests in others. Encourages, engages, and invests in others. We're reminded in 1 Thessalonians 5, we should not forsake the assembling of ourselves, but encourage and build one another up until the day comes. That's what you guys do. It may not always be direct. You may not even see the person you're delivering that freezer to, but you've encouraged a life. And what happens when we encourage, engage, and invest in others? What happens to us when we do that? What happens to us? Tell me. Exactly. We actually get the healing. We get the blessing. We hope to bless them, but when we do that, not because we expect anything in return, we are blessed and we are healed. We are nourished. Our soul, body, and mind are put at a higher level, and it's easier for us to cope. Would you agree? Yes. The third component, the third thing that I want to talk about is a thriver fights. A thriver fights. You used that word, Dave. It's a good word. And I think a thriver fights 2 big A's. The first is adversity. There's a guttural, internal willpower that I saw in my wife that resounded, was evident in her life. She refused to listen to what the counselor said and the doctors said. She was stronger, much stronger than me early on. Because of that, she fought back against the adversity that she was told that she had. The second is a thriver fights the adversary. Now, who do you think the adversary is? Who's the adversary we all face? Satan. He prowls. He seeks to interrupt. He seeks to confuse. He seeks to distract and deter. Last night I felt his presence. I thought I was going to go to bed very relaxed, get rested, and I went to bed, and all of a sudden, weird thoughts, weird emotions flowed through me. I knew what was going on. I knew what was going on. I got to the side of my bed, got on my knees, and said, "Get ye gone, Satan. You don't belong here. You're not going to mess up with me. You're not going to mess up with this blessing. I'm going to be with some incredible guys tomorrow, and you have no place here." I got very stern, just like when Jesus rebuked the demons out of the pigs in the story about the legion of demons. If you read closely in Luke what he did, he didn't just say, "Hey, get you gone out of them pigs." Excuse me, out of the man possessed into the pigs. He had to do it 3 times, and he had to do it with a stern voice, is how it is called out in the book of Luke. He didn't just beg, he commanded, but he did it sternly and loudly and convincingly. And that's what we need to do. The adversary is real, but the adversary is defeated. So when we fail and we go down, even when we think we've got it, that's not permanent. When we fight, we can lose, but that doesn't mean we lose the war. We can rebound, we can come back. And we can do it when we stay together, we encourage each other, when we fight together, and we're in community. I want to read in closing 2 things. A poem that I retrieved and I included in the introduction of the Rise Above book. This is a poem called Good Timber by Douglas Mallock. The tree that never had to fight for sun and sky and air and light, but stood out in the open plain and always got its share of rain, never became a forest king, but lived and died a scrubby thing. The man who never had to toil to gain and farm his patch of soil, who never had to win his share of sun and sky and light and air, never became a manly man, but lived and died as he began. Good timber does not grow with ease. The stronger wind, the stronger trees. The further sky, the greater length. The more the storm, the more the strength. By sun and cold, by rain and snow, and trees and men, good timbers grow. Where thickest lies the forest growth, we find the patriarchs of both. And they hold counsel with the stars, whose broken branches show the scars of many winds and much strife. This is the common law of life. The final thing is in the introduction that I read this week that Rick sent me in the book he's working on. It's from the book of Isaiah 30, 20, 21. Although the Lord gives you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, your teachers will be hidden no more. With your eyes you will see them. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, "This is the way, walk in it." We are not what has happened to us. I'll say that again. We are not what has happened to us. We are what we choose to become. And I thank you for the opportunity to be with you. I'd be amiss to say that if you want to look at some of the books in the back side of the flyer, there's special pricing for you today. It builds up my funds so I continue to bless people like you, because you bless others. Thank you for the chance to be with you today.